A battered messenger screams as he is bound with rough cords and loaded into a wooden trebuchet. The heavy arm drops, launching the human projectile through the grey sky directly into the shattered limestone battlements. This execution marks the opening of the Battle of Auberoche, 1345. 1,200 English soldiers, cut off in hostile territory with no reinforcements and no line of safe retreat, are about to destroy a French army of 7,000 elite combatants. This should not be possible. One English commander stands ready to turn that military impossibility into a financial windfall greater than his king's entire annual income. But the forest remains silent. Within 6 hours of operational failure, the primary financial engine of the English monarchy could face total economic collapse. The prosperous duchy exports over 80,000 tons of wine annually through the bustling docks of Bordeaux. This trade means survival. To destroy this vital revenue, the French assemble a massive counterforce of 7,000 elite combatants to systematically choke the northern frontier. Their heavy cavalry and infantry elements trap individual garrisons behind thick wooden palisades and stone ramparts. This overwhelming numerical superiority completely freezes the regional defense network, forcing local commanders to await a miracle. The arrival of the King's Lieutenant permanently alters the defensive strategy of the Southwest Theatre. Derby immediately leads a silent night march through the dense, trackless woodlands. He is not waiting for a passive siege. He believes his cousin Pembroke will join him en route with a massive second division. This expected reinforcement forms the baseline of his entire operational plan against the French encirclement. He pushes his 1,200 soldiers forward through the damp October undergrowth without pausing. This swift advance eliminates any chance of a safe retreat. A powerful stone fortress sits precariously on a limestone crag overlooking a tight loop of the Auberoche River. Below the battlements, the French army establishes a comprehensive blockade across the narrow meadow. Louis of Poitiers gives the strict command to divide his massive host into 2 separate containment camps. He positions a smaller detachment to watch the northern approach roads while his main body occupies the flat southern valley. Poitiers directs a relentless stone bombardment that shatters the castle's protective roofs, forcing the defenders into the vaulted lower cellars. The traps are set. Louis of Poitiers expects a slow, predictable siege operations against an isolated and helpless Gascon garrison. He operates under a fatal assumption, believing the main English rescue force remains stationary days away at Libourne. The French camp completely relaxes its guard as evening approaches. Armor is unbuckled, horses are unbridled, and long spears are stacked carelessly against canvas tents. Poitiers has never encountered Derby's specialized capability for rapid, coordinated strikes utilizing highly mobile, mounted archers. He calculates for a standard infantry approach, remaining blind to the hidden threat. But the trapdoors are opening. The total lack of French security on the western tree line forces an immediate operational pivot from the English High Command. Derby conducts a stealthy personal reconnaissance of the meadow, noting the completely unguarded perimeter. Time is running out. Pembroke's reinforcements are still entirely missing as the midday sun begins to sink behind the hills. Derby rejects a safe retreat, choosing instead to launch an immediate aggressive assault with his 1,200 soldiers. This definitive command sets the small force on an irreversible trajectory toward the crowded valley floor. A narrow meadow, pinned tightly between the limestone crag and the village of Le Change, forms a natural killing zone. Dense oak and beech forests carpet the overlooking hills, hiding the approaching English from view. The French army sits heavily in this geographic bottleneck, entirely surrounded by a deep loop of the Auberoche River. Space is an enemy. This confined area severely restricts their superior numbers, turning their massive size into a dangerous operational liability. The landscape itself becomes an obstacle to survival, trapping thousands of unsuspecting men in a cage of water and rock. Derby splits his small force with mathematical precision to exploit the severe geographic confinement of the French position. He directs his 800 mounted archers to advance silently into the thick foliage along the western ridge. Meanwhile, 400 heavily armored men-at-arms form a compact shock column on the flat ground to the south. A tiny detachment of infantry moves secretly through the brush to seal the northwestern escape routes. Every soldier checks his gear in complete silence. They wait for the single signal that will shatter the valley. The complete absence of Pembroke's division permanently destroys Derby's original operational plan as the final hour of daylight arrives. His scouts report that the garrison is collapsing from the relentless French bombardment, removing any opportunity for further delay. Derby faces immediate catastrophe before a single weapon is discharged. He stands at the edge of the tree line, listening to French laughter carry through the cold October air. 7,000 men, unaware of the 1,200 watching them from the dark. A retreat does not simply end this engagement. It ends the Gascon campaign and the financial lifeline of the English crown in a single afternoon. He must choose between an ignominious retreat or a near-suicidal engagement against an enemy 6 times his size. He chooses to adapt immediately, abandoning his defensive caution for an all-or-nothing offensive gamble. The time for deliberation is over. Derby roars his personal battle cry, Derby Guienne, signaling the absolute point of no return for his 1,200 soldiers. The Battle of Auberoche explodes into terrifying violence as the first massive volley of 8,000 arrows per minute tears through the trees. This devastating missile bombardment catches the packed French host completely by surprise during their evening meal. Thousands of cloth-yard shafts rain down into a dense mass of completely unarmored men, kicking over cooking fires and generating absolute chaos. The arrow storm has broken French order. But 6,000 men do not stay broken for long. Within minutes, their commanders will recover their senses, locate their weapons, and begin to organize. Derby's cavalry column must hit the southern flank before that window closes. And it must happen now. It works. The thick smoke of scattered cooking fires provides immediate cover for the initial English cavalry charge from the south. Derby's 400 men-at-arms slam violently into the disorganized flank before the French can locate their mislaid weapons. The impact is devastating. The immense momentum of armored war horses hitting an unready infantry formation inflicts catastrophic casualties across the narrow valley floor. Small groups of French nobles scramble frantically to buckle their iron breastplates in the gathering darkness. This coordinated assault establishes a clear operational advantage. Derby expects the gathering darkness to conceal his small numbers until the entire camp is overrun. He encounters a brutal reality as the initial panic subsides and the sheer weight of numbers begins to tell. The combat intensifies into a grinding, chaotic melee among the tearing canvas tents and the deep October mud. French nobles who were unarmed 30 minutes ago now fight back in partial armor, seizing weapons from fallen men and pushing the English lines back yard by yard. For nearly 2 hours, the numerically inferior English soldiers fight with desperate ferocity to prevent complete encirclement by their relentless attackers. The lines blur and the formations contract. A total collapse appears completely unavoidable as 6,000 men press in from every direction. Thick October mud splatters against the bright heraldic banners that rise defiantly in the center of the camp. Louis of Poitiers and Bertrand de l'Isle-Jourdain fight with stubborn courage to stabilize their buckling front line. They stand their ground. To halt the English advance, Poitiers makes the critical decision to draw his vital reserves away from the northern blockade. He focuses entirely on the visible threat, completely ignoring the fortress behind him. This unexpected operational redirection leaves his vulnerable rear dangerously exposed to immediate disaster. The grinding iron hinges of the castle gates swing open to permanently seal the fate of the entire French besieging army. Sir Frank van Halle watches the exposed enemy rear from the high battlements and recognizes his shattered opponent's vulnerability. He acts without hesitation. He immediately leads all the mounted knights the garrison can muster in a thunderous, unexpected sally directly into the valley floor. This fresh cavalry charge completely destroys Poitiers' assumption of a single front engagement. The psychological shock shatters the final remnants of French command cohesion, rendering victory certain. Within minutes of the garrison's intervention, the remaining French discipline evaporates into a scene of absolute panic. Exhausted and battered soldiers believe they are trapped between 2 massive rescue armies and break into a frantic rout. Thousands of fleeing men sprint blindly toward the steep banks of the Auberoche River, desperate to locate a passable ford. The cold currents swallow hundreds of weighed-down combatants who are hunted mercilessly by the relentless Anglo-Gascon cavalry. No rescue arrives, but the hunting is not finished. The complete destruction of the primary French field army leaves the entire regional high command dead or in chains. Louis of Poitiers receives a mortal wound during the brutal pursuit and dies within the English encampment. The loss is absolute. His second-in-command, Bertrand de l'Isle-Jourdain, is taken in chains, alongside the Count of Valentinois, 7 prominent viscounts, 3 powerful barons, and the nephew of Pope Clement VI himself. 11 lords of France delivered to an English camp in a single October evening. The idle French detachment to the north watches the slaughter from afar and executes a hasty retreat toward Périgueux. This structural collapse completely erases French military authority across northern Aquitaine. The Duke of Normandy expects to coordinate a massive counter-offensive, but receives the devastating news of the total operational annihilation. This sudden shockwave completely demoralizes his advancing main army, forcing him to abandon his entire southern campaign. His campaign is dead. He retreats in disgrace to Angoulême and promptly disbands his massive host of feudal levies. The Battle of Auberoche leaves the strategic Garonne and Dordogne valleys entirely undefended, inviting a rapid and unresisted expansion of English conquest throughout the region. Why does the historic memory of the Battle of Auberoche remain entirely overshadowed by the later, more famous slaughters of the 14th century? This engagement represents the absolute peak of war as a clinical, high-profit commercial enterprise. The captured French aristocracy represents an unprecedented mountain of wealth that will fund English military logistics for years to come. Common archers find themselves suddenly transformed into independent landowners through the lucrative distribution of noble ransoms. The battlefield functions as a corporate marketplace. Human lives are traded for staggering fortunes. And how can a feudal monarchy recover when its entire regional elite is captured by an army 6 times smaller? The French crown fails to absorb the critical tactical lessons taught in the narrow meadow beside the Auvergne River. They choose to dismiss Derby's innovative system of archer infantry coordination as a minor tactical fluke. This persistent refusal to adapt guarantees the replication of this precise military disaster on a much grander scale. The template for future catastrophes has been written in blood. A grim destiny waits for the next deployment. Within a single afternoon, the legendary victory at the Battle of Auberoche secures a fortune of £67,000, out-earning the king's entire annual income. Derby hosts a magnificent dinner inside the relieved fortress. The captured French counts sit at his table as lucrative guests. Henry of Grosmont becomes a chivalric legend, directly ensuring his historic elevation as the first Duke of Lancaster. The defeated French aristocracy faces decades of severe financial ruin to pay these crushing noble ransom demands. This strategic triumph clears the way for the campaign of 1346. The road is open. The strategic path from Auberoche leads directly to the walls of Aiguillon and to a campaign that will culminate on the legendary field of Crécy. Subscribe to stay with this series. The next engagement is already in production. If you are watching on a television screen, the QR code on screen now will take you directly to the subscribe button on your phone.